Last but not the least, the final category finalist for sustainable technology is the leak-proof valve. And here is on stage Dr. Ned Davis.
Thanks, everyone. And Caitlin, if you're still game for driving, awesome. Thank you so much. So I'm Ned Davis, and I've invented a valve that never leaks. This is perfect for a number of applications that I'll talk about, including hydrogen, which is pretty timely these days. Caitlin, next slide. Okay, so all traditional valves leak a little bit. That's simply a fact. Many valves start leaking more as they age, as they get old. Things get entrained in them. There's corrosion. I think one thing I should say, and there's a picture of a very, very old valve on the left there. But even with a new valve, with a new carbon fiber reinforced, super duper low emissions packing, the valve manufacturer, and for that matter the end user, doesn't really control how this valve is shipped. If it goes across the ocean in an ISO container on the side, that perfectly circular high-tech packing ends up as an ellipse when it arrives. So brand new valve being installed in a refinery in the Mideast may have a leaking packing right away. And if it doesn't, it starts to leak some over time. These leaks add up. It's about the equivalent of 72 million tons of CO2 in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. And what this is called in the industry is it's called fugitive emissions. It's emissions that aren't going through the smokestack. They can't be flared. A scrubber won't do any good. They're dispersed across the plant. The EPA at this point is driving sniffers around the perimeters of refineries and chemical processing plants to look for these emissions drifting in the wind. So it is a very, very big deal at this point. And in certain other industries, well, for that matter, in certain refining processes like HF alky, leaks can be fatal, and certainly in other industries like semiconductors. So Caitlin, if we can go to the next slide here. This is probably the nearest competing technology to ours, bellows valves, used extensively, for example, in the nuclear industry. It's not perfect. And I guess, the subject matter expert that I know from Shell, valve subject matter expert, said, Ned, it isn't really if the bellows valve is going to leak. It's more a question of when. The bellows are thin, they flex like an accordion, they fatigue over time. They typically, in any macro scale valve, they'll have a welded seal where the sheet metal comes together. That has a leak spec initially, gets worse over time. They can fail catastrophically, surprise, the whole entire bellows is gone. And for a tiny molecule like hydrogen, hydrogen goes through metal. Hydrogen goes through metal of my valve and causes some embrittlement too. And with a very, very thin metal like a bellows, that process is kind of on steroids. So, the South Korean nuclear agency was looking into magnetic valves even back in '82. They wanted something better than bellows. And the earliest patents I can find on magnetic valves go back to 1942. But no one really made it practical. And of course, back in 1942, the magnets just weren't good enough, but we've done a little bit more than that. Okay, Caitlin, next slide. So that leads into that. Our breakthrough is to make a magnetic circuit. Everyone who tried to do magnetic valves before tried to do magnets inside and outside the bonnet of the valve. And this makes a lot of sense, especially if the magnets aren't too powerful. It's the way pump couplings work. So there are pool pumps now that rely on a magnetic coupling. Pool water's cool though, and you don't have to weld the valve shut. I worked on magnetic valves before I came up with this invention, and I did the exact same thing. It's the logical thing to do, but it ruled out all the really compelling applications for me. I was doing that project for the Navy, but I couldn't do anything in the reactor room because it couldn't take heat. So now we've got something by moving the magnets outside, which is the main central patent. We have 6 patents on this 6 US patents on this technology now, 13 international. But by moving the magnets outside and using a magnetic circuit, that I'll show you on the next slide, we can do high heat. We can have the bonnet welded shut. We can have the ports welded shut on the valve. There literally isn't anything to leak to the outside from the valve. And I'll show you a slide later. Once that's solved, and that's primarily where the most troublesome leaks tend to be. But once that's solved, I can give you any reliability on a valve system desired. I don't really change the seat. My technology is to, close the bonnet of the valve, but I can give you in a probabilistic manner any reliability on the valve system. And that wasn't true with bellows, and that wasn't true with anyone who tried magnetic valves before. Caitlin, could we advance another? So this is how it works. The magnets are outside. I've got a prototype right here that I'll hold up and show at the end and try not to derail the middle of the presentation with. But it's a magnetic circuit, and I'll talk a little bit more about how I came up with the entire idea. But it's akin to what's done with grinding tables on machine tools or optics tables, where you flip a switch and the mount for the optics locks down, flip a switch and move it around somewhere else. The magnets are outside, and there's a magnetically susceptible material inside. So, for example, with a stainless valve, it would be 400 series stainless steel or pH4. That material can be encompassed inside a 316 or a Monel or a Hastelloy or some other exotic alloy, but it has to be present, and for a rotary actuated valve would have to be asymmetric. So it has to have a preferred direction to complete the magnetic circuit, and for a rotary valve to turn the valve, for a linear valve to move the stem in a linear manner. And I mentioned this led to a bunch of patents for us, and the most compelling applications of the valve, which include the high temperature ones like steam and the really tough chemicals. Next slide, Caitlin. Okay, so I hinted at this already. Once there is no longer a leak path to the outside, the valves can be put in series, and for that matter, in series and in parallel in a network to give any reliability for that valve network. So the individual seat of one valve may degrade some over time or leak, but they're not all going to at once. Couldn't do this with a bellows valve or for that matter, the earlier generation magnetic valves that still had to have a seal, at least for assembly, static seal. Putting those valves in a network or a series would typically make the reliability worse, not better. So we can do this too. By solving the bonnet, we can solve the seat also. Next slide, Caitlin. Okay, so there are a lot of compelling applications for this, and these are some of the ones that we're getting the most interest from. Hydrogen service. So hydrogen is a tiny, tiny molecule, very tough to contain. It's also very green, right? When hydrogen burns, water is only emissions. So in terms of the smokestack at the power plant or something, it's fantastic. It's just water vapor coming out. It's a different cup of tea down on the floor. If it's a contained area, hydrogen's explosive, as you know. It's also a very potent greenhouse gas. So leaking a bunch of hydrogen from around a plant that's using it is contributing to the greenhouse gas problem, maybe perhaps not subtracting from it as much as we might have thought. Semiconductors, and again in the news lately with the CHIPS Act and such, going with spacesuits when that stuff leaks, very, very toxic chemicals. Fugitive emissions, we've talked about at length, and I have a 2-minute warning, so I'm going to roll forward. But in any case, petrochemical industry, big deal. Reduced maintenance and higher reliability, of course, are very important too. I think in the interest of time, let me roll forward to the next slide here. We've received a bunch of patents, a bunch of interest, and then Corona shut down the world to some extent here. We're trying to rekindle it, and I think that leads into what I'm going to say on the next slide here, Caitlin. I wanted to talk a little bit more. I invented this actually way back for wave energy, sort of like the laboratory beaker and generating power out in the ocean, and the machines kept leaking, so I got rid of the packing there, did it for gears, did it for valves, wasn't compelling at the time, and finally thought of the optical tables and such. Caitlin, next slide. So we can eliminate valve leaks, no one else can do. Let's go one more. One more slide, Caitlin. Thanks. So I wanted to thank you. This is a huge opportunity. Whether I win the grand prize or not, the publicity can, I very much hope, rekindle this. There are only 2 of us working on it at this point. It would move the needle for us dramatically, and already has. And I appreciate your time and attention today, and just so very grateful to be here. Thank you very much. That during questions, I'll show. Here's, in fact, I can pass it down the line here, but watch your fingers a little bit. So what you've got in one hand is all stainless steel, and that's a magnetic actuator in the other. Things are a little bit strong.
Question.
So, questions? Yeah, just be careful your fingers when you put that on.
How small can you make this valve?
So we can go small, and especially for hydrogen, we fully intend to do so. A lot of the hydrogen valves are quite small. I would say that for a smaller valve, you have to want it really not to leak, like a hydrogen valve. For a very, very large petrochemical pipeline valve, typically we wouldn't add very much in terms of cost at all. A smaller valve, you're talking more of a cost adder, because typically the small valves are cheaper. To give you an idea, that medium-sized one that I passed around, and I'm worried I don't want anyone to hurt their fingers when that actuator goes back on, that one was about $115 as a stock valve, and I've got about $20 worth of magnets on it. On a very small valve, I might only have a couple dollars worth of magnets on it, but if the valve's only a couple dollars, that's 100% cost adder. On a big $15,000, pipeline valve, I'll be down in the noise. Even if I cost a few $100s, it's going to be in the details and noise at that point. Any other questions?
You mentioned that you have 0 external leaks. What about the internal leaks?
So that's what I was attempting to convey with the network. So I really didn't change the valve seat. That's not that I won't have some aha moment with that sometime in the far future, but I really didn't change the seat. The bottom of the valve is stock. But with any other technology, if you added more of the valves, it would increase the probability of a stem leak dramatically, in excess of what you're gaining by reducing the probability of a seat leak. With this, there are no stem leaks, totally welded shut, so we can build up a network of valves for any reliability that's needed. If it has to be 6 sigma, we put X number of valves, and we get 6 sigma on the leaks through the seat. Okay, thank you very much.
All right.